It's time, once again, for another Flashpoint Q&A, where we debase ourselves by answering questions from Twitch chat. Joining us this week are Mauisnake and Moses. And I have to say that Trapped in the Closet is not the only part of R. Kelly's career that Moses impersonates. You figure out what the other aspects are, or maybe they'll come to light someday.
All right, that one's really approaching. It's really approaching a line there with that one.
Give him back to the youth.
I didn't say which aspects of R. Kelly's career.
Yeah. I'm sure the implication is very.
Exactly.
It was. We've got some potential questions someday from Twitch chat, but as we wait for those to populate themselves right now, first up, are you still sitting on that bum-ass chair that you posted a picture of on Twitter right now? People are very curious about your chair, Jason.
Yeah, the whole setup seems to be a topic of conversation. I am sitting on that bum-ass chair. It's got a metal pig as the back, and a very, very sparing cushion. It's actually the chairs that I used as a kid. My family had as like our kitchen table. So I have an office, but the ceilings are 13 feet, so it's not very good for acoustics. So when this whole quarantine thing happened, I transitioned into the closet in order to bring a better product to all of you out there in Twitch chat. So stop harassing me about the closet and chair.
Why do you
see what he does, Mauisnake, is he say that's his play. He just says to people, "It's the ceilings; they're just really high." Like, yeah, it's the perspective's off.
Yeah, most people are leaving the closet. Jason entering it.
Yeah, exactly. It's
right
not very
back in.
progressive of you in the year 2020 to instead
we'll
put
accept
yourself
you either
into
way.
the closet.
I don't know
Also,
where to go. I think we hit the end of the closet conversation.
So wait a minute, was it implied though? Like, is that chair just one that like your family or whoever was in the apartment had before? Was that like already there or something?
No, this is like this was what our chair that I used growing up as like around our kitchen table. I brought it to this apartment. It wasn't in the apartment.
So that's just the one you were sat in as a little kid?
Not when I was gaming, only when I was eating dinner with the family,
No, that's what I mean. When you
yeah.
were the little kid and they were like, right, here comes the aeroplane, you were sat in front of that pig chair, the metal pig chair.
Yeah, there were
fair
two chairs had pigs on the back, and the other two have cows. In case you were wondering, it was an animal themed.
I have a question.
There's logic there, right? Okay.
Why do you have to use this chair in the closet?
I don't. That's the question. I don't have a good
Just to
answer.
complete the serial killer vibes, I'm guessing.
So a nice, as crazy as it sounds, a nice office chair has been one thing that I've never spent money on. I have one in the other room. It's a cheap one. It's pretty shit. So I didn't bother bringing it in here. But I just picked up the Herman Miller chair today. So I decided to pull the trigger on that one.
There you go.
Okay.
The new gaming one? You have a new
Yeah.
gaming one?
It does look sick. And also,
It does.
it's going to be good quality. What I love, this is a complete aside, by the way. What I love about the Herman Miller chair is people are like, that's so much money for a chair. And I'm like, yes, but you realize that you're sitting in it like all the time. And so your dollars per hour spent in that chair, not destroying your body.
By the way, I'm not taking any opinions or advice on money from anyone who lives in the Zoomer generation. Like, tell me how much of a waste of money it is for a chair that I'm going to sit in. By the way, human beings not supposed to sit down all day long.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit down all day long for my job. But tell me more about that, Mr. 20% APR on your car loan that you can't even afford the fucking car. Shut the fuck up. This generation is so stupid. It's like that famous thing when people say like, oh, I can't afford to eat healthy. What the fuck can you afford if you can't afford the fuel that goes in your body to be of decent quality? Like, I don't know about what you're making your discounts, mate. My body, where I sit, these aren't my discount areas. I like to discount things that don't fucking matter. Like, obviously, just some rude thing about their mother there, but I'll be polite now, whatever. I've got all you've gone on this and everything, right? Yeah, keep going, whatever.
No,
Have they got any questions by now, aside from who the fuck is Mauisnake? Which I was hoping would at least be a comedy question someone would ask.
So let's talk about some questions. Let's talk about Envy. So it was rumored recently that one of our partner teams, Envy, may be undergoing some roster changes with Mihu and Calix, the European wing of that team. Let's play GM. Who would you guys like to see on Envy? If you could replace players, and let's just say you're replacing Mihu and Calix, which are the rumored players being replaced. Not confirming it, by the way, but if they were to be replaced, how would you guys build the Envy roster?
For the sake of just tearing every other NA team down and raising yourself, you just got to poach from Liquid or EG at this point. You just need to get talent that's in your region, so that, because Envy's not beating either of those teams anytime soon. Even if they get a star replacement, they actually need to poach if they want to to supersede those teams.
I don't know. This is a conversation that's weird because, it depends on which way you want to take it. Do we want to exist in the realm that of realistic roster changes? Because the ones that Maui just listed, while they're accurate, are not realistic in any way.
Yes.
Right.
The problem with Envy is they have no attracting power. Like, nobody's sitting there, man, be like, man, I really wish Envy would call me right now. Like, where's my phone call? Why isn't Astro coming with me with a contract? So, I mean, you got to exist in that world where you're going to go after someone from teams like Triumph, from teams like from Chaos. So, I mean, in that sense, you'd want to go for guys like Grim, who have shown a little bit, and you'd want to bring them up. I think the bigger issue is I've never felt like, man, I don't want to bag on Envy, but I've never felt like their entrance into Counter-Strike had any kind of a long-term plan. This seems like an organization that's just kind of winging it based off who they can get on the roster, keeping things as cheap as possible and seeing what you get, and then moving on to the next attempt. So I think more than anything, you got to bring a leader in that is going to be able to establish some kind of a process that you can take to actually have that organization have a decent team. And in that sense, I don't think there's any real good answer out there at the moment. So they just feel like they're stuck in limbo.
I think the key word that Jason just mentioned, leader, is what they need. I think that Nifty has had countless attempts now to try to make some sort of roster move, or just, he's built a team almost around himself and tried just switching pieces around this Nifty centerpiece. It's not working out for Envy right now. It's not looking good. And I love what Nifty brings to the broadcast, and that he's ready to talk shit for Flashpoint's sake. But other than that, what he brings in the server is not it's not been a compelling argument.
Yeah, the main issue for me is, realistically, this is how bad their team is. Even when I hear they might make 3 changes, I'm like, why stop at 3?
Yeah,
I don't really know what the pieces you keeping are here. So the problem they have is there's only 2 real routes you can go. One is, as Jason's implying, you have to actually get out the checkbook and spend some real money. Because basically what you have to do at this point in time is you have to do what Complexity did. You have to start over and get a piece that you hope's big enough. Or even if, I know BlameF's name wasn't big, but there was underground hype among players. Yeah. Players wanted to play with this guy, thought he was good. Probably better than his name value is. So either you got to go that route and really spend and get a good player from Europe that's available or something, or you've got to just gamble and get all the NA talent that's available. That's actually the one positive if you've got a team like Envy, is if you wanted to go with NA only talent, there are players out there we're talking about, Zeppa from Chaos has looked decent. Obviously Grim kind of showed people some skills. Don't know if I'd recruit the Leaf guy. I mean, listen, mate, see if he even plays another fucking year in his life. So
listen, roll the dice. That's what I always say, Duncan.
So, but you either go the extreme gamble route like that, where at least these are pieces that this is worth giving a gamble to, or you got to just sign proven talent. Their problem is they're stuck in between the two at the moment. So I don't really know what the point is. And actually, in their region, you're not getting any top talent. Everyone, between Liquid, EG, and Gen G, they've got all the all-star talent pretty much. They've just got them all in these 3 teams. So I don't even know what options they can do realistically if I'm trying to be plausible.
Yeah, no, that's the tough part. And I know part of it is because I don't spend a whole lot of time at that level of North American Counter-Strike, so I'm not sure what the big names are circulating in the tier 2, 3 region. But I mean,
there's no big names right now.
Yeah, I mean, outside of just getting absolutely crushed at the moment, the biggest issue that Envy has actually isn't even other teams in Counter-Strike. It's Valorant.
I was going to ask.
It's taken all the players that you would want to look at if you're Envy. All the players that quit Counter-Strike in North America to go try and make it big in Valorant are the players that Envy would theoretically want to look at and recruit, that would be within their budget, that would be within their range of experience. So they just got, wrecked by a completely different game coming into the scene.
So let me modify this question then too, because if Thorin's theory is correct that you would have to get some sort of big European star in order to coalesce this team around, right? Because you say that there's nobody attractive enough to make other players swipe right on the Envy Tinder profile. So how do you make yourself more attractive? If you could sign one core player, if it had to be European or somebody else?
I mean, if you're going to go the route of signing the European players, I don't even think you necessarily give up the players that are already there. I think those guys actually made Envy look as good as they possibly could with where they are at. The problem with going the European route is you don't like Duck had said too. If you have to go the complexity route of paying for some kind of a name that can be the center point, but also then you get to a point where if you have too many Europeans, you got to play in the European qualifiers for events. You got to play in the European qualifier for the majors,
Yep.
and that's not easy. So I think Envy, is probably out of all the founding teams of Flashpoint, I think Envy is in the most shit position at the moment. So yeah, I mean they're in a weird spot, and that's the question: is does this roster change that's rumored of those European players signal that they're just want to make the changes, or does it signal they want to go back to a North American roster? Does that signal the end of like attempting to get European players? But more than anything, I think the number one route they've got to go is the leadership style, and that's always like a black hole of like who knows what you're going to get. Like Blame F complexity, as much as he's probably paid so much money, like as much as that contract was worth, you can't do better than someone like Blame F who's come in and works that hard. Like even if you give that much money to someone, there's no guarantee they're going to work nearly as hard as someone like Blame F. So Envy's in a really, really tough spot at the moment.
Yeah, I think if I had to like select a particular leader from the T2 scene, maybe Mighty Max from Endpoint would be the first guy just because he can speak English. But other than that, North America's in a drought right now. If you want to know just how bad NA got hit by Valorant, I when I was playing MDL seriously, I never made playoffs, never even made, I would say, top 10 or 11 teams. But this season, with practicing maybe 7 hours a week as a team, the team that I was playing on made MDL playoffs. Like, it's really bad. And the first place team in MDL was Chaos, which makes sense. And then second place is Mythic. So if it's just a bunch of puggers that are, the second best MDL team right now,
I was
that's
going to
not
bring that
good
up.
luck.
A stream
Yeah,
team that doesn't practice made
exactly.
second place in the semi-pro North American division. So North American Counter-Strike is all sorts of fucked up at the moment. It's
Yeah.
actually like as much as like our top teams have caught up to the European squads. After that, like the gap is just massive. We like the entire bottom just gave out of the North American scene. There's probably a bunch of different factors that go into it, but if you're a team trying to put together a roster of like tier 2 North American players, you're in some trouble, and that's the scary part. Like the North American scene has to really have another come to Jesus moment and figure out how to turn this ship around because it's in a horrible state at the moment.
It's also worth noting too that the Valorant hasn't hit Europe as hard. Especially like if you compare the viewership of Valorant events in Europe and North America, they're much bigger in North America right now. So it doesn't seem like the game has the same level of traction in Europe, which probably is one of the reasons why the tier 2 scene hasn't been hit as hard there.
Here's one actually just from chat. Actually, a couple of people threw out some cool names. The big one, I mean, one that's coming out that wouldn't be a bad shout is people saying bring Alex over to Envy. But if I'm Envy, I'm really hesitant to do that, considering Alex's reason for stepping down was that he was really having a tough time being away from home as much in the travel schedule. That's something I wouldn't want to touch if you're going to force Alex to come over and be in Texas. The other name that's pretty interesting that I just saw thrown out is Nitro, and I know that's the Liquid conversation where we said that's not very realistic, but it might be worth having the conversation with Liquid. Nitro just switched away from being an in-game leader. He might not want to do it at all, but that's a player who, if he continues to struggle within Liquid, you might be able to pry him away. You might be able to, entice Liquid with a little bit of cash or something to get Nitro. Someone with at least leadership experience and someone who is part of the Liquid organization from the beginning of CSGO and helping to build them into the contender they are today. So he's at least got that experience to him. The question is, does he want to be that leadership figure? Because he's just stepped away from it in Liquid.
And to answer the question that has been asked, would it be possible to build up a high school or younger scene to develop players so this issue doesn't occur? Again, we said this before. Our problem right now is that Counter-Strike is not profitable for professional teams. So we need to solve that problem first, which is what Flashpoint is here to help accomplish. We can't really talk about any kind of youth or amateur or semi-professional structure until that problem is solved, because otherwise we're just training kids to go into something that is unsustainable. So, and I also don't know who would do that at the high school level. It wouldn't be us.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know a guy local to me who's kind of building up the collegiate scene, which is kind of a cool idea. I mean, again, it stretches into the area where it's not profitable, but most schools and most of the obstacles from the people that are involved in collegiate esports, the biggest obstacle they have at the moment is that, collegiate schools and colleges don't want to bring in, again, it goes back to the violence of Counter-Strike. They don't want to have that kind of a game, or they're scared of it or they don't fully understand it. So for whatever reason, that's a big obstacle going on right now.
You got to love it, dude. These are the same schools that have dump hundreds of millions of dollars into their football program, giving
Yeah.
people real brain damage, but they can't actually handle some fake violence in a video game.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is. It's always a funny conversation when I encounter that, and I'm just like, all right, well, I can't even have that discussion anymore. But I don't know. It's an interesting conversation because it's not just about bring it to the high school or the collegiate level, which is obviously kind of starting to happen, but mostly in like not official clubs. I mean, just the conversation around Counter-Strike at the lower divisions right now, even in the tier 2 scene, has to be, North America used to have like a really thriving and vibrant LAN scene for Counter-Strike all across. There'd be the Midwest tournaments, there'd be the East Coast tournaments, the West Coast tournaments, the Central and Texas tournaments. And in each of those regions, because you actually had, a LAN calendar that could be sustainable, that people could go to, that you would have, a tournament once every single month, you'd actually start to see teams popping up like Texas-based teams and East Coast-based teams and West Coast-based teams. Now, internet getting better has kind of made that a little bit obsolete, but at least if you have those players within your region that you're constantly meeting and constantly playing against and constantly competing against, that's how you start to get noticed, right? And that's how players in the past got discovered, and we no longer have those. We no longer have those regional events. So I think what Fragadelphia does is really cool with their like 2 to 3 small CS:GO lands. They've started doing some Valorant lands as well in North America. But I think that's the important thing for Counter-Strike to get started is, screw the internet age. That's great and all. And obviously once we get, through with the global, the little minor global pandemic, but having that kind of a local land scene where people can travel to those events is huge to keep this game alive at the lower divisions.
It's also, by the way, a way, as Muzz said there, it's a way better way to get scouted, because what would usually happen would be, as he was saying, there'd be all these regional tournaments. And usually, by the way, the money would be decent because like you'd pay to enter. So the money might be like 1,000 for first place or something. So as a result, what you would get would be like people who are mercenaries, like a guy who plays at the invite level, like he plays with his semi-pro friends who are going to that tournament. So as a result, if you go and you're some new player who ends up being legit, that player who now is at the invite level might already know who you are. He might even ask you to join his next team or recommend you to a friend. So it's a way to be like verified in a way that like, even in playing in like FPL, you don't get until you've done it like quite a lot. You have to have quite a few people sort of vouch for you before people try and pick you up to a team. Whereas at that point, if you're like half land proven and you've already performed against these players, you can make the transition tomorrow as long as you get the right offer.
And I mean, like unlike FPL and Rank S, it places the emphasis of your performance on how well your team does. It's not just, a pug system where one player is just seeing how good he can do individually. And on top of that, as we all know in esports, maybe, I mean, it shouldn't obviously be this way to every extent, but reality is that there's so much emphasis on how you can get along with people and your personality, if it meshes well with potential teammates. So being able to meet somebody in person who might be asking you to join their team later on, if you're likable and you're social, or, that's how you get in. That's the kind of like physical networking aspect of esports that people don't get to do enough today, the same way we used to in the past.
Here's a question for Mauisnake, Lord of Tier 2 North American Counter-Strike. Do you have a particular player that you find interesting from a personality or mindset perspective?
I think Infinite probably would always strike me as a player that it's like his personality's gotten him in trouble, actually. But yes. he oftentimes, when he's described by his teammates, is that guy that, when Simple was coming up in the scene, how everyone was like, dude is so toxic, like he always just wants everyone to be great. He pretty much just demands greatness of his teammates in a way that can be too abrasive for people to want to side with him.
Yeah,
but
Americans are babies, I agree.
His skill is undeniable. So if people are willing to just let go of that and, just put their egos aside, like you just mentioned, it's really, like, this guy could easily be on a T1 team. And I think that he's a little bit misunderstood right now. And I think he's making strides to be, a more well-rounded person. But until he gets that opportunity, he's going to always have that little kind of wild card when he's brought up in a conversation, just the same reason that he was not picked for Cloud9 back when they used Zelsis as a stand-in. His history is a little bit foggy, it's a little bit clouded, but I think that if he gets it all together, he's probably one of the one of the best. If it's either him or Grim in terms of tier 2 talent for the potential there.
And it looks, I mean, Infinite was playing some Valorant with some of the Cloud9 players, but wasn't signed to the roster, so it looks like he's back to CSGO now as well.
Yeah,
he dabbled. He dabbled a little bit in Valorant, but he isn't one of the players that is committed full time to that.
We all dabbled, Monty. We all were seduced by the dark arts for just a limited amount of time.
The experimentation phase that you go through in college is this the video game equivalent here with Valorant? Like, you try a little bit, but sometimes you just move on with your life.
So, just see if you need to bat for the other team for a little bit. Now back with Counter-Strike.
Indeed. Are there upcoming qualifiers for the league? Yes, we will announce those eventually. We will still have qualifier teams, kind of core to our purpose here at Flashpoint. Here's another stand-in GM question. Do you think Cloud9 should make some roster changes? And if so, what would they be from your perspective?
And if not, how much did Cloud9 pay you to say that?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think, Mauisnake? What's your thoughts on him?
I think that Cloud9 right now is actually, in terms of the landscape right now, is in a fine position, and they don't actually need to change too much. It depends on what their goals are. If they want to be if they want
top 10.
if they really want to be top 10, then they should probably switch out JT eventually. It's like the Daps effect, where he's doing a great job. You can see it in the server that they're all playing under one vision. But JT is just too much of a hindrance as an individual for me to have any faith in that roster breaking into the top 10 consistently. They could probably do it if they have a nice run at one tournament. But at the end of the day, he's if you look at the top 25 teams, he's actually probably literally the worst player in all of HLTV, or of all those top 125 players right there. So it's hard to break. It's hard to do much better, but I think they might want to switch out their coach, actually. I think you might want to develop your play styles beyond just set plays. I didn't catch them as much at Summit because I was on the EU broadcast, so maybe Jason can talk about if they've added a lot more defaults to their game or anything, but I haven't really been seeing that come out from them. It seems like JT is just, the best freeze time quarterback coach. He just calls the right play at the right time, and it works a lot of the time. But on CT side, he's a glaring hole on their defense.
Do you think that, before Jason answers about their more recent performance at Beyond the Summit, do you think that JT could transition into a coach role?
Yeah, that dude has encyclopedic knowledge of play.
Seems like he already is one bit. Basically, that's what he was trying to imply, is like the offensive coordinator. Yeah. But the problem is you have to play the game right now to do that. So that's the tough part.
Yeah.
What? Do you just keep quiet, Duncan, until like a little dagger hits your brain? I don't know, man. It all. I think there's some truth to it. Here's the problem: is again, it goes back to the realistic question where Cloud9's not going to be able to attract anyone from like EG or Liquid or any of the teams that are better than them playing in the region right now. And the hard part for me saying yes, they should make a roster change, because I'll just get it out there. Yes, they should make a roster change if they want to get to top 10. However, I also know Cloud9 has this very deep theory at the moment of being able to train and build up and develop talent, in a way that no other org is really trying to make it happen. So in that sense, I guess it's all about, it's all about their timetable. Like how long are they going to be okay with where they're at? How long until they say, finally, we need to pull the plug on this? So, I think eventually they're going to get there without the results that they're hoping for. So yeah, I think you should probably start looking at making roster changes if you're Cloud9. And while there's some cool talents on that team and there's some cool stuff, the coach isn't the only roster change you should be making. There's plenty of other opportunities and plenty of other players you should look at. And if I'm honest, for me, pretty much everyone on that team should be, kind of on the chopping block, so to speak. I really like what I see out of Floppy and OC. Sonic seems to be playing better, at least at Summit, the way that he wasn't really playing all that well at Flashpoint. So I don't know. I guess for me, for Cloud9, it's like, see what you've got for the first LAN out of this break, out of this online Counter-Strike. Like when LANs come back, see how you do. And if it's not good, that's pull the plug. Like it's time. I think they're about there. But again, since the tier 2 region has been completely chewed up and decimated, I'm not sure where you turn, because you're not good enough to pull a player away from Liquid or Gen G or EG. You're going to have to bring up someone from beneath you and hope that they fit in. So again, it's kind of like they're in a tough spot as well, where I don't really see a roster change that's going to make them better. I think the obvious one is, again, if you go to Liquid, and I'm going to put the optics again on Nitro just because he seems to be the player that's going to be the next one left out of that team, or he's got to be the next one on the chopping block if they don't do well soon. Then all of a sudden you have someone with experience as an in-game leader or experience playing at the top levels.
I think
I'm just going to give it to you straight. Let me just say this one thing. Here's the premise, right? If, in fact, Flashpoint is a long-term better solution to monetizing the game for team organizations, then organically, eventually, the best talent will come to Flashpoint, including teams like Cloud9. If they don't, and those team organizations cannot justify the big buyouts and high salary signings of the EPL players, then Flashpoint, the project, has failed and should be closed down immediately.
There you go. There you go.
There we go. Solve that Gordian knot for you. Nice and easy.
One thing that can just kind of stop all the roster potential, like fake GM stuff, is just that you look at the NA landscape right now, and in the tier 2 scene, there's only 4 players that are worth talking about: Zeppa, Grim, Infinite, and Cooper. And Cooper is just like, if you want an opper, he's the best NA opper probably that's not on a top team right now. Other than that, you're working with a lot of players that just don't have much proven LAN experience. Like you could take some gambles. Like if I had to throw in a fifth, like Neptune would probably be the best support player in the NA scene right now that's not on a top team. But other than that, if you can't make anything out of those 4, maybe 5 players, there's nothing really to talk about, because there's no IGLs that are coming up right now that are just like blowing everybody away. Sheikh Zula has done a great job with Triumph, so maybe you could consider him. But like other than that, the best players are on the best NA teams right now.
Isn't Android is still out there? He's still playing in Counter-Strike. Who was the other name that was on that Complexity team?
Yay.
Yeah, those guys. I mean, they've at least shown some potential. And they haven't been able to consistently carry it on, but I mean, those are guys that have shown that they can compete with the best on LAN and frag out with them as well. So, I mean, if you're one of these squads, or maybe an Envy, those are guys definitely worth taking a gamble on, to go back to that previous question, if you want to go that route, but we'll see.
As a tangential question to this, and I do think it's interesting, at what point, I'm going to change the question. At what point during the online era should teams consider making roster changes, because we just don't have the LAN data at this point? How far do you have to slide in online performance before you're like, shit, we should make a roster change if you're a team?
I think if you're a Liquid, an EG, or a Gen G, you don't really mess with it unless things at Liquid are getting way worse than we could possibly imagine. And I don't know what's going on within their team, but they seem to be the one that might have the most internal issues of those top 3. Those 3 teams, I just would chill. Same with Furia, same with MIBR, obviously. Everyone else, you know, to a certain degree, screw the online era. If you see a change that you think can make you better, do it. Like, you might as well. It's like, even with Cloud9, where I kind of said, you know, hold on until the first LAN. It's also, what do they rank now? Like 22nd, I don't know, 25th, something around there. Like, yeah, what are you doing? Like, make the change if you see one. If there is one available that you think can make you better, do it. There's no reason to pause. There's no reason to wait, really. Like, who knows? We don't know how long this is going to last.
Fair enough.
Glad you all agree. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good take.
He drew the line. He drew the line after the top 5 and said everyone else is fair game. I like it. Quickly, some other ones. Can women CS teams qualify? Absolutely. Anybody can qualify for Flashpoint. I mean, that's the great thing about esports, is that we don't have to.
Luckily, Monty answered that question literally, which is the only safe way to answer it.
Look, man, anyone at all can play in Flashpoint. That's how it works. A lot of questions about Dignitas. Now, we did last week. I'm going to bring in the Fiflaren opinion about Dignitas' performance, which is, so they have been objectively not doing great online. And Fiflaren's take was that Dignitas would be doing much better on LAN because of all of their experience, and because he thinks that the players can't I hope I'm expressing this right, can't be in the same mindset online that they would be on LAN, and also that experience gives them an edge. Agree? Disagree? Or is Dignitas just completely washed?
The problem is there's one variable that he didn't throw in there, which is on LAN they would be playing even better teams who also are amazing on LAN, so they wouldn't do better. I understand what he meant. I think he just meant Mauisnake, like it suits their strengths more to be on LAN because they're all super vets, etc. Except Holzuk, basically.
Yeah, the thing with this Dignitas team is that I keep finding myself facing these qualifying statements for their lack of success, and just like I read the recent Freiburg interview from Dignitas about how he's just basically, where are you guys right now? Did you guys think you'd be further along? Did you whatever? And then like twice in the same interview, he just references, "Ah, man, but it was such a setback to lose Halzerk for Flashpoint." And just later in the same interview, "Ah, man, but if we had Halzerk at Flashpoint, we didn't have to rebuild everything." It's just eventually you just have to. I mean, I respect these players tremendously, but right now there needs to be some kind of just mental shift, and I know that maybe they'd be better on LAN. There's no doubt about it. I think they would probably be better than, say, Contact, if this were all on LAN. But at the same time, if you constantly are making excuses for yourselves, that's not a championship mentality by any means.
Well, it's also, they don't have the same problem that you guys are referencing with some of these other teams, which is that they're not NA based or NA core teams, right? So theoretically, they have a larger and deeper pool of players available to them.
No, the opposite. Because like, if anything, like who in Europe's going to join Dig? No one good. So I actually think they're shit out of luck, mate. Like right now, all they would have is money to attract people. As far as I can tell, Dig, the org, just looking League of Legends as well, doesn't want to spend money right now. So I actually think they're shit out of luck, mate.
I think they could probably get away with I mean, if they want to go the route of changing some players, I mean, they'd have to go down to like the younger European players that haven't had a chance but have shown promise. That's how they'd have to start replacing the old guard. I think I'm willing to buy into those comments from Flaren to a certain extent, but the biggest trap I see for Dignitas is history repeating itself to back when they were an NIP, and they have this close-knit group of guys who love playing together despite the fact that they aren't having as much success as they'd like to. And then you get into that cycle where, how long does it take them to make that first roster change of Flaren stepping down? And how long after that did it take for Freiburg to step down? And how long after that did it take Exist to step down? So I think there's a real big chance that we just see Dignitas just complete that loop, that circle of life, where it's going to become obvious at some point, I think, that they'll need to make at least one change. And I don't think they're going to have the stones to, cut one of those guys and actually make the change to go younger. Maybe they will. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think that's going to be the biggest obstacle, is as they go on, how many events are they going to have that excuse for? How many events are they going to say we need more time on LAN? Or how many events are they going to say, Halzerk still isn't fully integrated into the team? At a certain point, you're just going to have to, rip the Band-Aid off. And that's my biggest question for them.
Reasonable. Flashpoint will expand to other esports. If so, when? We should have an announcement about that soon in terms of running other events. It won't be Flashpoint, by the way. Flashpoint is specifically Counter-Strike, but it will be B-Site, the parent company, operating things.
So the real answer to that question is no. Flashpoint will not.
That's true. That is true. B-Site will be operating events. This is accurate. If Bubzkji is benched, what are his best options? So, obviously, we've heard some rumors about this for Mad Lions. He was basically the Flashpoint MVP of Flashpoint 1. But this might mean that he is an available free agent for potentially other Flashpoint teams. So if you could move Bubzkji to another Flashpoint partner team, where would you move Bubzkji?
Almost all of them. I mean, Dig immediately should probably try and get him. It doesn't matter if he speaks Swedish or not. Just fucking get him. He's way better than all your players. Envy could be on basically almost every team. Like, I mean, the joke is obviously Mad Lions is the only one he can't be on, isn't it? Like, apparently, but almost every other team should probably give it a go.
I can't get over the fact. Yeah, I agree with Duncan. I can't think of a whole lot of teams except for maybe like MIBR, who's just going to be speaking Portuguese, that wouldn't benefit from Bubzkji. But I can't get over the idea that Zipnix, Glaive, Bubzkji, and Kirby are all sitting on the bench or step back from the teams they're currently on. Like, how is there not an organization that is just going out to each one of them and just creating a team with 4 players from the Danish scene? Bubzkji, who's one of the best young talents we've seen out of Denmark, KRB, who's a major finals MVP, Glaive, who's considered one of the best in-game leaders, if not the best in-game leader of all time in CSGO. He marshaled the best team of all time. And Zipnix, the greatest clutch player in the history of Counter-Strike. So why the fuck isn't somebody throwing a shit ton of money at those 4 guys and just saying, come on, let's roll? Like, even if I'm Mad Lions too, even out of that victory, I just look at those 4 players and I'm like, if I can get them, I'm dropping these other 4 guys. I'm going that route. So I have not yet removed the mental block that makes me look past those 4 Danish players just chilling.
Who would be the 5th on that team?
Who the fuck cares? You could put, I don't even know.
Jason's Angels.
You could
beautiful
bring
Counter-Strike team.
Bring Hunden back. They'll probably still win a trophy.
Look, you have to.
I would ironically like to see that though. Like, actually, and obviously that wouldn't work because Hunden's IGL as well. But I would actually like to see Hunden with really skilled players. I'd love to see what would happen.
Wait, Hunden to be what? You cut out.
Have a team where you had really skilled players, because that's the one thing he's never had. He has people before they become who they are. Like,
he's always
actually had. Yeah, they've had the real team.
Yeah, that would be kind of interesting. I mean, again, I don't think it would. I mean, obviously with the Glaive thing, that'd be weird, but I don't think it would work in today's Counter-Strike to have someone who's that much of a liability. I'm trying to think of any team in the top 10 that has someone who would be that Hunden type player within a team. You really need all 5 players to be individually pretty gifted to be able to win events these days, which is tough for him. But I mean, I don't know. There's got to be players in Denmark and Sweden or Norway. I imagine Norway's got some hidden gems within that scene as well that you could just kind of slot in with 4 Danish players. I don't know how interchangeable that is, obviously, with different languages, but I don't know. 5th player.
I'll just throw Acor in.
Yeah.
Just keep Acor.
Everyone loves Acor.
Yeah, why not?
Take Valde out of OG.
There we go. Now we're talking. Now we're cooking with gas.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, based on that topic of conversation, do you guys think this is the end of the Astralis core? And by the way, probably the reason why this team hasn't been formed without any information is that those buyouts from Astralis are probably significant. Very significant. So I would imagine, as no-brainer as this plan sounds, I think it might be actually very expensive to potentially execute. That said, do you think it's the end of the Astralis core? Is Astralis dead?
The main problem with the topic is basically just that at the moment, the entire CS circuit is just under the swaying pendulum of the major. If the major happens, it changes everything. If it doesn't happen, a lot of teams are going to have to mentally reset what all their plans were. So at the moment, as far as we can tell, maybe Flashpoint will be, but the major will be one of the first lands, it's looking like at the moment, if it ever happens. So if it happens, surely they're just going to bring the 5 back together and play the last time. So I think they're definitely going to play another tournament at this point in time. Back when I said it's possible they might never play again was like 2 months ago, when it was, there was still so much time before then. We might have already been playing lands now, people thought. So I think that's probably the part that makes that not as sexy a question as it otherwise would be. I think most people are going to at least play the major and then split up,
Yeah, that's a really good point, is that major. I mean, Astralis even skipped the summit, qualifying event, because if they had used players that weren't Glaive and Zipnix, who are on,
basically signaled that they want those points for the road to Rio, yeah.
Yeah, well, they were in like 2nd or 3rd place in points in Europe, I think, coming into this, and if they had played without Glaive and Zip, they would have dropped like out of contention. They would have dropped out of the points to qualify. So it's just, what a stupid system that is, but that's a different conversation.
We can have that conversation if you want.
I don't honestly. I haven't looked enough at the numbers to actually be able to speak about it intelligently, but I know that any system where, like, if you have to make a roster change as a team and you lose like a percentage of your points, that can be crippling to try and qualify for the event is such a silly way to do things. But I don't know. That whole Astralis situation is so weird, with all the news and all the different rumors and all the different articles that have come out about what's going on within Astralis, that it's hard for me to tell. If I had to guess, I'd say it's a 50-50 chance that Astralis lineup doesn't come back and play together. And that's me I legitimately don't know any inside of information or anything that's going on there. It just feels very 50-50 to me, which is an odd way for them to go out. It doesn't sit right with me.
What do you think, Mauisnake? You have any thoughts?
I think the angle that they might just play the major and then call it quits depending on the result of that is interesting. I think that's pretty likely because
One last
why?
hurrah.
Yeah, just play it out.
Ride
I'm
off
trying to
into
look.
the Rio sunset.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers right now to see if they'll even qualify, and I think there's a pretty high probability that they're going to make it to the major, even if they don't even play the autumn, whatever the autumn RMR event is. I think they're gonna make it, so they might just do that.
Here's
Yeah.
here's maybe the best way to answer this question is no, it is not the last time we'll see. Well, it probably is not the last time we'll see this lineup play together, but it is like the last time. Like, I don't think they're when they come back. I don't think it's going to be the same Astralis. It's not going to be nearly the same level that they've been playing at. So, in a certain sense, we've probably seen the last of that dominant Astralis. But there were people who said that last time they kind of went through a slump as well. So who knows? Maybe they surprise us one more time. But I've very rarely seen players take this kind of a break for this long and then come back and step right into it and pick up where they left off. And unfortunately, when they come back, I think, in theory, with the way the schedule works, it's pretty much going to be like a month maybe before the major begins. So I mean, I don't know. It's all crazy. It's all weird. Yeah.
This is an interesting question. How important is it for event organizers to use a universal ranking system? From my perspective, it's incredibly important, which is why we had the arrangement with the CSPPA that we did for them to create their own ranking system that was independent, right? Now, that hasn't happened to this point in time, but obviously we're not going to be using ESLs, which unfairly weights their own events as part of a determination for how we are doing our seedings or anything like that. What are your guys' opinion on the current HLTV ranking system and how that stacks up in the scene?
I think it really depends on what you're actually using it for as a tournament organizer. If you're using it to seed, then yes, it's very important. If you're using it for your group seedings but I think the approach more or less, I think it doesn't have that much value simply because I think when teams have ranked themselves coming into tournaments, that was always a pretty fair assessment. And that didn't require some external ranking system. It just is, get all the teams together, have them vote 1 through 12 for all the teams that are in attendance at the tournament, and you have a pretty good seating system for the rest of it. And you could even do a second one where you do another vote based off of the group stage results for the playoff seating as well, so that it's not just Swiss can sometimes lead to some really weird playoff brackets, like when Astralis had to play Liquid in the quarterfinals that one time. Things like that shouldn't happen. So then should maybe be a reassessment of teams that either qualified for the playoffs or teams that got bounced from the tournament itself. I don't think you necessarily need this world ranking, because sometimes the ranking going into the tournament is not actually even what you end up seeing in the initial group stage. So a reseeding is sometimes a good look.
To this point as well, not that we should be heavily weighting scrim performances, but also, if there hasn't been an event in a while, teams might have a different sense from their own scrim or practice about what the rankings of teams should be immediately before an event that we might not know about publicly.
Yeah, my feeling on rankings is, I think the obviously the reseeding and the team seeding each other themselves going into tournaments is great. I actually really like that. I would honestly, and this is probably a bit of a bias, I'd like to see, the casters and the analysts and the talent who study these games and watch these teams all year have some kind of an input as well. But more than anything, I think even the HLTV ranking, which I think is pretty decently accurate, I think it weights too much on having to play so many events and having to be involved in that grind. I think that's a really tough part for teams, where when you talk to teams, because those HLTV rankings are used to make invites for tournaments as well, it's like the amount of grind you have to do just to be in consideration, just to be high enough on the rankings to be considered for an invite, is absolutely mental. And I think we need to have a much better system. And again, this pretty much every problem in Counter-Strike at the moment stems from the fact that we have a clusterfuck of a schedule throughout the year. And until that gets changed, we're not going to see the ranking system improved and adjusted. We're not going to see this conversation is just always going to be there. So I think it's really, really tough. And to maintain a position by having to play a certain amount of events as well is kind of a dicey prospect also. So here's the thing. I'm fine with ESL having their own ranking to a degree, but they don't even keep up with it. They've got dead teams. They've got teams listed on there with rosters from like 4 months ago. So when stuff like that happens, it just turns the whole system into a joke. And you don't get to have this ranking for the top 20 teams and then kind of just throw away the next 20 teams and just ignore the changes, ignore the roster. So I don't think they give their ranking nearly enough love. And HLTV has its own problems, but it's the best we've got at the moment. I would like to see some universally agreed upon ranking between HLTV, CSPPA, ESL, Flashpoint, obviously, and Blast. I'd like to see all those organizations in a rare fucking display of collaboration for the betterment of the scene, which is an incredible thing to have to fucking ask for. To see them come together and come up with some kind of a system that actually works for everyone and make it better for everyone.
Down.
we know there are always, there's always two members of the party, 3 members of the party that are down. It's those last other ones that usually aren't. But I don't know. That's something that's far past due.
I think what's worrying about HLTV's ranking is that we're all trying to be proponents for better mental health and giving players breaks and everyone having time off, and so that they can have some R&R so that they can come and be the best team. But HLTV, the way the ranking system works, if people aren't aware of it, is that if you play more games, you can gain points. The only way you lose points isn't by losing matches, it's by just not playing. So a team like Mad Lions, for example, is ranked actually 22nd in the world right now on HLTV, and that's simply because they lost 1 BO3 in the CS Summit qualifier, and then they couldn't play CS Summit, so they couldn't gain all the points that they were going to gain in that tournament because they just didn't make that one tournament, and all the teams that did play it passed them up. Like OG, for example. Do I think OG is a better team than Mad Lions right now? It's a kind of a coin flip for me, actually. So
Dude, look at some of them, though, like Team Spirit's above them, for example. And all Team Spirit did was just win like that fucking Road to Rio CIS edition or whatever, which, listen, that didn't get ahead of Na'Vi, but I'm with you. Like, that doesn't compare to what Mad Lions has done.
Exactly. So to weigh it so heavily on the HLTV rankings, there probably needs to be a better one where, like, if Astralis takes a 3-month break or something when they were at their prime, we'd still know that they're probably a top 2-3 team, but the HLTV rankings might knock them down a peg or two just by the nature of it. It never had to happen, thankfully, but that's just the same. Or actually, it did when Liquid passed them, but that's kind of a similar case where you don't want to have to incentivize people to play so much Counter-Strike that it wears on them mentally, so that we see burnout from players like Alex and the players on Astralis right now.
One thing I would like to change that we don't have in any ranking system, I tried to do it in mine because I'm using the eye test, but I wish there was an ELO system built into these rankings. So it isn't just that I finished second at the tournament. It's like, well, who did I beat? If I finished second, but I beat Na'Vi and fucking whatever good teams you want to pick out, Vitality, a couple of teams that are top ranked, then I should get more points, in my opinion, than just getting second. If the other guy who finished third didn't play any of those teams and just beat the bad team, he should get less points. So I would like a modifier like that, because I feel like it gets around a lot of the issues that you have. Because at the moment, I know part of how they determine the points you get from an event is based on like factors that are only about the event, like how much prize money did it have, how big an event is it considered. So for example, if I had to guess, they probably gave way too many points for Flashpoint 1. Like, I actually would use the ELO modifier to take the prestige in Flashpoint 1 down because it didn't have the top teams there. So I don't care if you won that event. Like, that might not even be as good as coming 5th in EPL or something. I'm sure it's way more competitive. So I would like that in the future in some sort of a ranking system, just in the same way as a lot of sports like tennis have it, basically.
There are a lot of questions earlier on about whether bubbles would be feasible. So let me explain this for people who don't know. One of the ways that leagues like the NBA are kind of dealing with the pandemic is to create an insulated environment where they kind of just keep everybody within the same ecosystem and cut them off from the rest of the world, more or less, and have that kind of structure so that it limits contact and limits ability for the coronavirus to spread.
Okay.
In a hypothetical universe where we could do this, what would your esports bubble look like? What would make an acceptable bubble? So let's pretend that the major is going to be held in an esports bubble. Probably not in Brazil, given the current pandemic state of things in Brazil, but maybe somewhere else on Earth. What would the major bubble look like? Like, what would you guys want it to, like, features or things to do. What would you guys want it to have for you to be happy in an environment where you could stay there for a month?
Holy shit, well, I'd want like a little mini LAN cafe, so we could challenge each other some games. Everyone get in, everyone come down. We'll do like a little 5-on-5, 2-on-2 action, maybe some fucking Mario Kart. I'd love that in a little corner over on the other end of the.
So some console. You want the PC bong, the
yeah. Well, that'd just be one part of it. Also you got to have a gym somewhere. We got everyone trying to get healthier. I'd like a shooting range personally. I think that'd be fun. Maybe pop the bubble. But
first thing Moses wants inside a bubble is guns being fired inside the bubble. Like,
yeah, he wants
cliche Moses.
Listen, I'm just saying, the bubble that NBA has at like Disneyland or wherever the fuck that is, they got plenty of room for a gun range. They could have tanks out there, and you wouldn't even know on the other side.
What Moses wants is virtual shooting of guns and physical real-world shooting of guns within the bubble. So
one thing I would request: Korean barbecue for people who like real food. Maybe Chipotle for you Americans.
Yeah, like a bar
or just generally, a nice kitchen that you could go to be able to cook your own meals, cook your own dinners. For those of us who are of the culinary persuasion,
I'll leave all the obvious jokes out.
I would. I don't know if you guys have been following the NBA bubble, but I would not want a Dwight Howard character who's just taking his mask, never wearing a mask, and also coming to social media and saying like, "I don't think vaccines are real. I don't think the virus is there." Just like that's not a person I want in the bubble. I'll say that.
They may not behave the most responsibly. It's true. It's true. So that's it. All Moses needs are firearms and video games.
And food.
Yeah, food. Food is biggest. I think food's the biggest for sure.
I don't know, man. Like, I wonder, do the NBA players in their bubble in Disney World, do they get to ride the rides?
I don't think so.
It's not in the park, Moses.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Moses, you know what it is, Duncan.
Moses, they're not actually in the park. They're in like a hotel slash. They're like a hotel slash conference complex.
All right.
See, what I would ask for is I would ask for everyone in the world to be in the bubble, because the thing is, the world doesn't go around without all of us. So we need all of us together, working together. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. That's my belief and philosophy.
What if we had the bubble in the new Star Wars section of Universal Studios?
I think
I think that's Disneyland.
There's so much wrong with that statement, Jason. Star Wars is owned by Disney. It's not at Universal.
Never.
Second off, wouldn't that get boring pretty fast?
I don't know. That's why I'd like to try. I haven't been there.
I could watch
Jason, we can't just put everything you haven't done in the bubble for you to do while you're in the bubble. That's not a reasonable request.
The question was pretty wide open.
It was a bucket list, almost. It was a bubble.
I want all my friends and family and my neighbors.
My daughter died when I was 7, but they said they was coming back in paradise.
Also, I've always wanted to go to Bali. Can we put Bali in the bubble, please? Like, what the fuck, dude?
We can have. Listen, that's an easy one. We can have the bubble in Bali. Then now we're good with gas. Now we got some real shit going on.
Yeah, good public transportation and free healthcare, universal healthcare as well.
All great ideas.
Can we end capitalism in this bubble too?
If we're making ridiculous requests, I want Moses' cigarettes in this bubble to be replaced with PCP, just so I can read it from training day when Moses gets wet. When he's looking at me through all filters, like, "Whoa, what's going on, Thorin?" Like, didn't know you like to get wet, Moses. That's PCP, angel dust, motherfucker. That's what I was trying to recreate that scene. And me and Jason, great fans of the theater.
That was a sick fucking scene.
That was a fucking straight fire scene.
Fucking baller scene.
Wow. Well, I think that our bubble is sounding increasingly like a Mad Max Thunderdome. The more that we actually investigate it with, weaponry and substance abuse. So probably won't be doing that at the major, even though you guys could seriously hope for that.
Unless Immortan Joe makes his own bubble.
Doja coming in on front of a torn up semi truck.
Immortan Doja. There is a brilliant Photoshop for somebody out there. That sounds horrific. Let's see here. Can Pansy come to Flashpoint? Maybe. I think Pansy's casting is good. She's been doing mostly Valorant.
Put it this way, I've said this publicly. If she wants to come to Flashpoint, just hit me up. We'll probably make it happen. I don't know if she does, unfortunately, because in her career at the moment, she's doing other things. So I don't know if she wants to come back to CS. If she does, it's certainly something we could look into.
Yeah, great caster.
I'd love it. I'd absolutely love it. I think Pansy's great.
I haven't worked with her, but I would love to. She's awesome.
Let's see here. Any other talent additions for Flashpoint 2?
Not yet.
Not yet. Potentially.
I think there's one person that I think could come into Flashpoint and do something really cool with if we can pull off some of the content ideas that we had last season. It'd be like a weird
Sushi Dragon. Just wondering.
Sushi Dragon everywhere. Sushi Dragon worldwide 2020.
I think DeBears could be. I think DeBears is a personality who has not quite been used properly in talent lineups. I think he can exist somewhere outside of like a formal like desk analyst. But DeBears is probably one of the craziest and funniest personalities I've ever known throughout my life, and there's ways to use him that organizations haven't been set up to do. But I think he could do some really, really funny content to be with.
I'm amazed they don't hire him for Summit, by the way. He always seemed like an obvious person to bring in.
Well,
He did this time.
he was on the EU broadcast
But
with me and
again,
Dignitas.
Again, it was like it was a weird Summit broadcast. I'll say
Yeah.
that because I've been part of like the silly summits, and I know Duncan, you have as well. But it's like when Summit becomes a qualifier for the major, it's really hard to find that line of like
Yeah,
you're
it's-
supposed to
that's
be a little
weird.
bit silly and casual
Sure.
Summit style, but you also have to give the games enough respect because they're theoretically qualification to the championship. So that was a weird Summit. So he was there, but I don't think he got to be unleashed to his full potential.
Yeah,
It was really weird that they would even designate that an RMR event, given that that's just not the tone or purpose of Summit. That was
Yeah, but it checked all the boxes. It isn't Flashpoint, and fuck everyone who isn't Flashpoint. So Valve they all successfully maneuvered the minefield that all the rest of the CS scene did. So congrats for getting up to pace quick enough.
Yeah, to bring it back to DeBears, I was in his Airbnb, and that dude is a modern philosopher. That he needs to have his own segments or something if he's going to be used properly on a broadcast. And I'm glad you brought up how old summits were, because he would be the perfect guy to just stumble on a couch and just drop a couple wisdom bombs and then just dip out, just in the background. And when he thinks this is time again, he'll jump back in.
Yeah, he's great. That's all I got. I have some ideas for DeBears that could make him great on a broadcast, but yeah.
Have you considered working with esports engine for Flash? But we have no reason to work with esports
Don't even know
engine.
what is that. No, wait a second. One question. What is that?
Oh, esports engine
Adam Apicella
is Adam Apicella's company.
Is it a company that just runs tournaments?
Yeah. Like we have Faceit to be our tournament operator, and yeah, we are a production company, so I think we're pretty good. I mean, I think esports engine and NGE do good work, but we don't have a function for them. Like what esports engine typically does, for those who don't know, is like they've been doing before the pandemic. They were doing a bunch of like the Overwatch League and Call of Duty League homestands and setting up everything and doing the tournament and event operations side. But we don't really have that need in particular. Let's see here. Do you think COVID will ultimately be a net positive or negative for esports as a whole? Really?
Right. It goes without saying, we're just going to assume he means in terms of the effects on the community.
Yes.
Obviously, nobody is saying it's net positive in any context otherwise, just before people get stupid. So it just means in terms of what will happen to esports. Like, for example, the obvious angle is, will like the increased viewership or the fact that we were one of the only things, is that going to somehow actually end up helping esports in the long run?
So my
What do you
answer to this is yes. And it's going to be a controversial take here. Again, to reiterate what Thorin's saying, not because I'm cheering for this pandemic, but I think if we look at the results of it, it is going to, and has already to a certain degree, popped the bubble of a lot of the unsustainable investments within this scene, which I think is something that was kind of a runaway train and needed to stop in order for us to seriously reevaluate as an industry what it means to be profitable and sustainable in the long term without the help of substantial amounts of venture capital constantly propping up companies that are losing money. So I think that's actually an important feature of what's going on right now. I also think that for those of us who are capable of surviving the downturn in investment and marketing spending, that in the long run, our ability to sell the increased numbers during the pandemic, because we have seen viewership go up pretty significantly, will benefit us once it goes away and the marketing budgets are unlocked again and the economy stabilizes a little bit more, or things are less uncertain in the future. So I think in the short term, it's been absolutely shit. In the long term, I have hope that we can have some good things come out of this. And I think in the long term, if I had to predict, it will be a net positive for the industry.
Yeah, I have a pretty similar viewpoint on that, where tournament organizers are going to have to reassess the way that they're running these events and find areas where they can save money. In this move, I know for a lot of us, with this move to broadcast being done online for the moment, and some of it, obviously for me, out of my closet, I think TOs have discovered there's some ways they can make content that they haven't really explored before. There's some ways they can do things.
I've got one for you, Moses. You might like this.
Okay.
Listen, this is going to sound harsh because it just sounds like tier one want everything our way. But I tell you what, from doing like Blast Online and having all the proper equipment and looking good, tell you what, there's a lot more events I would say yes to that aren't the biggest events in the world if I could do it online. If I didn't have to go to the physical location. Because like there's a lot of like one of the things at the moment in the scene are like the tier 2 tournaments that get fucked over. It's just because we have too many tier 1 tournaments we can do, so we're just never going to say yes unless it's like one where it's like right near where you live or something, is there? Like, so if we could do events online, it would change the dynamic of which events you say yes to and no to, right?
So yeah, and certainly, especially the point about tier 2. I think maybe tier 2 events might be the big ones, like the DreamHack Opens. Like you can have talent, you can have your broadcast talent do it from home, and we've already experimented with DreamHack being able to do it. Blast obviously pulled it off better than anyone.
It's more important for the events that have the 4 best of 3s a day. Let people stay at home, for fuck's sake. That'll kill you if you're there in person.
Also, I think in Blast's case, out of all of the online tournaments that I've watched in every single game around the world, Blast did it the best. I think Blast...
That's because they spent tens of thousands of dollars shipping out all that equipment, though. That's what the other TOs wouldn't do, basically. Like, the other TOs were just like, if you got a webcam, cool. Like, in this case, like, dude, they actually really spent on that shit.
I mean, to be fair, some of the other broadcasts, like Overwatch League, have sent out, like, Blackmagic cameras and a bunch of other high-end equipment to casters and everything like that. But I just think in terms of them being thoughtful about the experience and what content they could make online and how they could make it look, they did the best job out of anybody. And so just to piggyback onto this, I think that moving forward in the future, this might be a viable model for some of these other events, like you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. As crazy as this sounds, I hope ESL looks like a company like ESL looks at this and says, ESL runs like 7 arena events around the world throughout the year. I wish they would take one off. I wish they would do 6 or 5 and say, oh, we're saving like $5 million off renting an arena on flying 16 teams and 10 talent out to all these different events. And if I had to be honest, especially as it pertains to talent, I think the biggest change that we'll probably see at some point in the future, I think it was probably going to happen anyway, but I think this will certainly speed things up, is it wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing a world in which, and this has been talked about, I think the League of Legends scene talked about it first, because I think it happened at one of the Worlds, where the broadcast is actually done from a separate studio than the arena, where like the analyst desk and the people who are involved in the broadcast, instead of going to Australia and New York and Cologne, Germany, well, you'd have to go to Cologne because ESL Studio is in Cologne, but I think that's more likely to be a situation where they say, okay, we're going to bring 5 people to Cologne and we're going to do content out of our studio, and then the casters will bring to the arena because they need to be, in the vibe with a large crowd or something like that. And I think that's a way that we'll start to see things end up going, because it's just going to be easier for these companies to manage within, a space that they've already developed and customize and control.
I mean, as somebody who did that with Riot and League of Legends at Worlds, I will say that I don't really see the value in having the analyst desk on site, really, because we don't live off of the crowd's energy or anything like that, so it's pretty easy for us to do it remotely. My one complaint about that scenario was that, it was sometimes like based in Los Angeles while the tournament was happening in China or Korea, and so we were casting it like, I was sleeping like noon to 8 p.m. and then waking up and then going and broadcasting from like 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And that shit just sucks. All right, for you maybe. For me, the inverse sleep schedule I think made my performance worse. So I think if you have a remote or a centrally located desk, it can definitely save on cost. But I would just do it in the region or relative time zone of where that event is being held. That would be. It's possible. It's doable. I did it for weeks at a time, but it does suck to live on reverse schedule for like 3 or 4 weeks in a row.
We did that for a major qualifier with PGL, where their studio was out of Bucharest, and like the event was going on, and like the LAN was going on in California, and it was just like you just wake up at like 8 or 9 p.m. and you're just like, holy fuck, I don't even know where I am. I don't even know what country I'm in. I don't know what's happening, and you're casting until 5 in the morning, and it's just it's soul crushing. Yeah. Unless you're Duncan, in which case
apparently not.
You drive on it.
But I do think like there is still value to having casters on site, because the way, any caster will tell you that the way you react is different when you're in the room and you can hear the energy of the crowd, and it does affect, I think, the cast pretty significantly. I think that anybody who's professional can do a good enough job, but are you going to get the best performance? Absolutely not out of a caster under those circumstances. Okay, well, guys, I think that'll probably do it for us. I don't want to take any more of your time. Thank you. Unless anybody has any final words that you'd like to say, Moses, Maui, Thorin. Nope.
I'm good. I think I got everything out. That was great. That was very cathartic.
I'm glad. We give you an opportunity to rant in front of Twitch chat. We will be back next week for another edition of the Flashpoint Q&A. Hopefully, we'll be back in September for an edition of Flashpoint 2, which we're still working on, by the way. Scheduling is always a fun exercise for us, especially during the time of COVID-19. So thank you, guys. We will be back next week. See you then.